Dogs hadn't slept in 11 days. That was the number Corporal Thibodeau wrote in the incident log, his handwriting getting shakier with each entry. 11 days since the last handler transfer had gone wrong. 11 days since the kennels at CFB Trenton had become something closer to a maximum security ward than a military working dog facility. 11 days since Staff Sergeant Okafor had quietly started keeping a second log, one she kept in her jacket pocket and didn't show to anyone, tallying every incident that could justify a recommendation to the base veterinarian for what the manual called humane termination of service. Nobody called it that out loud. Everyone was thinking it. There were 5 of them. 5 retired military working dogs, all Belgian Malinois and German Shepherds, all decorated, all broken, had come from different units, different postings, different theaters of operation. One had done 2 rotations in Afghanistan with a PPCLI element. Another had spent 4 years on a CSIS protective detail so classified that even his retirement paperwork had sections blacked out. A third had been the lead detection dog on a joint task force operation out of Petawawa that nobody at CFB Trenton was cleared to know the specifics of. The service records, what could be read of them, were the kind that got framed and hung on walls. Their current behavior was the kind that got doors reinforced with steel plate. The kennel runs were a long corridor of chain link and concrete along the eastern edge of the base, backing onto a stand of spruce trees that muffled the sound somewhat, odd enough for the airmen quartered in the adjacent building. 3 of them had put in formal complaints about sleep disruption. Okafor had filed those too. She filed everything. It was the only thing she felt she had control over anymore. "It's not aggression," she said to the man standing beside her, a lieutenant colonel named Pressler, who had driven up from Kingston that morning with a clipboard and a tight expression. "Not exactly. It's something else. I've worked with stressed animals before. This isn't stress. It's more like." She paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound ridiculous in front of a superior officer. She couldn't find one that didn't. "Mourning," she said, looked at her the way men with clipboards often looked at people who used words like mourning in operational settings. "They're dogs." "Staff Sergeant." "Yes, sir." She left the rest of it unsaid. What she could have said was this: 4 of the 5 dogs had lost their handlers within a 7-month window. Not to combat, 3 retirements, 1 medical release. The 5th dog, a 9-year-old Malinois named Bravo, whose real working name was classified, and who everyone simply called Bravo, a handler in the traditional sense. His handler, a warrant officer with 12 years of K9 experience, had been killed in a training accident in October. Not overseas, not in some distant, heroic context. On a Tuesday morning, 20 minutes from the base, in a scenario that should have been routine, Bravo had been in the vehicle. He had not been injured. He had not left the scene voluntarily. He was the one in the far run, the one that didn't bark. The others, Reaper, Duchess, Saint, and to shepherd cross the unit called 40 because of the number on his original training tag. They made noise enough for all of them. They threw themselves at the fencing. They paced us to fields. They snarled at the young handlers who came in to feed and water them with the hesitant movements of people entering a room where they knew something bad had once happened. But Bravo stood at the back of his run and was perfectly still and perfectly silent. And that, Okafor had written in her private log, was the thing that frightened her most. Just a dog that has given up making noise has made a decision about the world. And it is not a hopeful one, is her? Pressler was saying something about escalating protocols and a behavioral assessment team from Ottawa when the sound changed. It was subtle at first, a lessening of the noise, but a shift in its quality. The way a crowd shifts when something unexpected happens at the edge of a room. Reaper. Reaper, and lunging rhythmically at the fence since they arrived, stopped mid-lunge and stood rigid, his body angled toward the south end of the corridor. Duchess stopped her pacing, who had been spinning tight circles for most of the morning, went still between one rotation and the next, as though someone had pressed pause on a recording. Okafor turned. An old man was walking the access lane along the south perimeter. He was moving slowly, the way people move when they have somewhere to be, but have long since stopped being in a hurry about getting there. He wore a canvas work jacket over a flannel shirt, the collar turned up against the November bite in the air, and he carried a soft-sided tool bag over one shoulder, the kind that plumbers and electricians use, worn at the corners and dark with age. His boots were steel-toed and had been resoled at least once. Hair was white and cut short, and the skin on the back of his hands, visible when he shifted the bag on his shoulder, was the kind of weathered that comes from decades of outdoor work. It looked like someone's retired grandfather. He looked like a man who had come to fix something. He was not looking at the kennels. He was not looking at Pressler or Okafor. He was looking at the spruce tree line to the north. The way a person looks at something familiar, something that requires no commentary. Is that? Pressler said. Okafor didn't know. She reached for the radio on her vest. Before she pressed the call button, the impossible happened. All 5 dogs went silent. Not gradually, not in sequence, together in the same instant, the way a flock of birds will change direction, without signal or hierarchy. The noise simply stopped. The sudden absence of it was physical, a pressure change that precedes a storm. Okafor's ears rang with it, as Pressler had stopped speaking mid-sentence. The old man had drawn parallel to the first run. He hadn't slowed down. He hadn't looked at the dogs. He was still watching the tree line, except nothing at all. But the dogs were watching him. All 5 of them pressed to the front of their runs, not aggressively, not defensively, but with the specific estimation of animals encountering something they recognize and cannot name. Even Bravo had moved. He was standing at the front of his run now, which he had not done voluntarily in 11 days. His dark eyes were fixed on the old man. His tail was not wagging. His posture was not submissive. He simply stood and watched, with the kind of stillness that comes not from defeat, but from deep, concentrated attention. The old man stopped. He turned, unhurriedly, and looked at the kennels for the first time. He didn't look at Pressler. He didn't look at Okafor. He looked at the dogs, each in turn, with an expression that Okafor would later struggle to describe in any report. It was not pity. It was not assessment. It was something closer to recognition. The look of a person seeing something they have seen before and understanding precisely what it means. "Sir," Okafor called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is a restricted area. I'm going to need to see your access pass." The old man reached into his jacket pocket with the deliberate economy of movement that belongs to people who never waste a gesture. He produced a laminated card and held it up without walking toward her. She was going to have to come to him. She did. The card was a base contractor pass, issued through the facility's maintenance office. Up read E. Croft, Edmund Croft. The photo was a match. She handed it back. "Mr. Croft," she said, "kennels are off limits to non-personal." "I know," he said. His voice was quiet and carried a dryness that wasn't unfriendly. A maritime accent, or something close to it, worn smooth with time, as looking past her at the dogs. "Someone called in a drainage issue on this side of the building. I'm not here for them." He nodded toward the kennels. "I will say you've got a problem with that one." He nodded specifically toward Bravo's run. "The quiet one. This one's close." "Close to what?" Pressler said. He had walked up behind Okafor, and his voice had the edge of a man who has been left out of a conversation he considers himself entitled to lead. The old man looked at Pressler for a moment. not with hostility. With the patient assessment of someone determining whether an explanation would be useful or whether it would simply produce more questions. He appeared to conclude the latter. "Close to done," he said simply. His jaw tightened. "The dogs are under assessment by a qualified." "That one served with someone who didn't come home," the old man said. He wasn't interrupting. He was simply stating a fact that had been hanging in the air. The others lost their partners too. But they know their people are out there somewhere. That one knows different. There's a difference between grief and guilt. And nobody here has figured out which one he's carrying. He shifted his bag. "Which drain is it?" Okafor told him. He walked past her toward the maintenance access panel at the base of the building. And as he walked the length of the kennel runs, dogs tracked him in absolute silence, their bodies turning incrementally as he passed, like compasses following a bearing. Pressler said something under his breath. Okafor didn't ask him to repeat it. No, it was Corporal Thibodeau, who approached her 20 minutes later, his expression uncertain. "Staff Sergeant, effector." He paused. "You should probably come." The old man was crouched at the fence of Bravo's run. His tool bag was open on the ground beside the maintenance panel, it apparently already addressed, because the work was done and the panel was closed. He had pulled a short piece of knotted rope from somewhere on his person, just the kind of thing that gets used in dog training, and he was holding it loosely against the bottom of the fence. Bravo was lying on the concrete on the other side, his nose pressed to the rope through the chain link, his eyes half closed. He was making a sound Okafor had not heard him make in 11 days. A low, soft sound, as a whine, something older than a whine. The old man was not speaking. He was simply there, his breathing slow and audible, his hand resting against the fence without gripping it. "Mr. Croft," Okafor said. He didn't look up. "I'd be back here with the animals." "I know." He still didn't move. "Give me another minute." She should have insisted. She didn't. He eyed his own dusty fields. She stood behind him and watched Bravo, who had not allowed any human being within 3 feet of his run without launching himself at the fence, lie quietly on the other side and press his nose to a piece of knotted rope held by a stranger. And she thought about what the old man had said about the difference between grief and guilt. And she found she couldn't make herself speak. After a minute, maybe more, he rose with the careful deliberateness of someone whose knees have opinions. And he picked up his bag. Bravo watched him, but didn't move. His breathing had changed. Still slow, quiet. But different from before, not the stillness of a dog that has made a decision about the world. Something else. "He needs a job," the old man said, not turning around. "All of them do, especially. He's been trying to figure out what he did wrong. He needs to understand that he didn't do anything wrong. That's not something you can explain to a dog with words." He turned and looked at Okafor directly for the first time. His eyes were a pale gray, the kind that have seen a lot of weather. "But you can show him. Give him something he's good at, something that needs doing. Let him succeed at it. Do that every day." He shrugged slightly. "He'll come back. I've hurt you," Okafor said. "I have," the old man agreed, without any particular weight on it. Pressler appeared at the end of the corridor. "Staff Sergeant, I need." He stopped when he saw the old man. "Is that the contractor? Someone want to explain what the contractor is doing at the kennels." "Drains fixed," the old man said to Pressler, pleasantly, and picked up his bag. "Hold on." Pressler walked toward him with the bearing of a man who has decided a conversation is going to happen. He had interaction with restricted assets. "I'm going to need your full name, employer, and I'll be contacting facilities too." "Edmund Croft," the man said. "I work for myself. Have for about 15 years. He reached into the bag and produced a folded invoice slip, which he handed to Okafor rather than Pressler. "Parts and labor, at 30. He looked at Pressler with those gray eyes, and something in the look made Pressler stop talking, which was not a thing that usually happened to Pressler. "You've got good dogs, and Colonel. They're not broken. They're just waiting for someone to tell them the mission isn't over." He nodded, a small, contained movement. "You'll want to check the drainage on the north side, too. The ground freezes. Different problem." He walked away. Okafor looked at the invoice. Handwriting was clear and economical. The letters formed with the specific neatness of someone who was taught to print legibly and took the instructions seriously. Parts. Labor. A total that seemed fair. No company name, just a phone number with a 506 area code. She looked up at Pressler. He was watching the old man's retreating back with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. San. No, he was a man of processes and directives. Pressler, a man who moved through the world with the assurance of someone who has always had the right form for the right situation. He looked, just then, didn't have the right form. "Run his name," he said finally. She did. While Pressler went back to his clipboard and his calls to Kingston, Okafor sat at the terminal in the Kennel office and searched every database she had access to, which, as a senior NCO at a major base, was more than most. M. Croft. The contractor pass was legitimate, pulled from the base maintenance roster. He had been contracted twice before, both times for minor plumbing work, both times with no incidents noted, just a GST number that checked out. An address outside Belleville, a rural route. No social media presence. A vehicle registration. A 10-year-old half-ton, registered in New Brunswick originally, transferred to Ontario 5 years ago. Nothing else. No service record under that name. No federal clearances. Nothing. She sat back and thought about the piece of knotted rope and the way Bravo had pressed his nose to it like he was receiving information through it. Annings. And she thought about what the old man had said about guilt versus grief. And she thought about the way he had held the fence, not gripping it, just resting his hand against it. Air. The way you rest your hand on the shoulder of someone who is having a hard time, not to fix it, just to be there. Gator Fields. She went back to the kennels. She spent the rest of the afternoon with the dogs. Not running protocols, not implementing anything. She pulled a plastic chair up to Bravo's run and sat in it and read a base bulletin she had already read. And when he came to the front of the run after about 40 minutes, she didn't make a thing of it. She just nodded at him like he had confirmed something she had already known. Stayed until the sun went behind the spruces and the temperature dropped enough that her breath was visible. The next morning she arrived before first light and started a new log. It was a different kind of log. Less an incident record, more a training journal. She noted what each dog responded to, what they ignored, what made them tense, and what seemed to ease something in them. Implemented what she privately thought of as Croft's program, though she wrote it up in official language for Pressler's benefit. Structured daily task repetition, individual handler assignment, scent detection exercises with decommissioned training aids, extended perimeter patrols with graduated human contact. The kind of thing that, on paper, looked like a sensible enrichment protocol. The kind of thing that, in practice, was about telling 5 grieving dogs that there was still work to do and that they were still good at it. It took 3 weeks before Reaper stopped throwing himself at the fence entirely. It took 5 weeks before Saint's spinning ceased. Bravo was different. He moved at his own pace, which was slower, and which required patience that Okafor had to work at. Ocean. There was a Tuesday in December 6 weeks in, when she arrived to find him sitting at the front of his run waiting for her, and she had to go into the supply room and take a few minutes before she went to him. She didn't want him to see her cry. He was a dog with enough experience of human emotion that he would have noticed, and she thought it was better for both of them if she came to him steady. Sure. She told Corporal Thibodeau about it later. Joe, who was 23, and had grown up in Trois-Rivières, and had been afraid to enter the kennels 2 months earlier, nodded with the gravity of someone who understood exactly what she meant. He had his own story by then, his Fields. A slow and particular thing that had happened between him and Duchess over several mornings of doing nothing more than sitting near her run and talking quietly about unremarkable things. The weather, the hockey standings. A letter from his mother. The culture of the place had shifted. It was hard to point to a specific moment when it happened, because it didn't happen in a specific moment. It happened the way most real things happen. Gradually, accumulated small actions. Through choosing to sit with something uncomfortable rather than manage it away. In February, Pressler sent word that the behavioral assessment team from Ottawa had been stood down. He cited improved metrics, which was true as far as it went. That mentioned Edmund Croft in his report, because Croft appeared nowhere in the official record of events. And Pressler was a man who preferred his reports to contain things that could be verified. Okafor did not argue with this. She had her own record. The invoice was still in her jacket pocket. She had not submitted it for reimbursement. She wasn't sure why, exactly. It had something to do with the 506 number and the rural route address, and the fact that she had not tried calling either of them, had decided without quite deciding that some things are better left as they are. She had, however, run one more search, late on a night in January when the building was quiet. Not for Edmund Croft, a field sounds. For something else, an old reference she'd heard once from a senior warrant officer during a posting in Gagetown, something he'd mentioned in passing, and then immediately seemed to regret mentioning. A training element that had existed for a period in the late 70s and 80s, attached to a unit she didn't have clearance for, working in places and in ways that didn't get written down. Fields. Dogs and handlers selected for something specific, something that went beyond the standard MWD program. Ability that, according to the warrant officer, had no name in any official document, but that people who knew about it referred to quietly as deep bond protocol. The idea being that the connection between handler and dog could be developed to a point where it became something that transcended training, something that operated on a register that couldn't be codified or taught in a classroom, only cultivated over years of deliberate trust. The search returned nothing, and not expected it to. She pulled up Bravo's training log instead and made her notes for the day. He had completed a full perimeter patrol without incident. He had accepted contact from 2 of the younger handlers. At the end of the session, he had sat beside her at the south fence line, his shoulder against her leg, looking out at the spruces, the fields, and she had put her hand on his back and felt the slow, steady rise and fall of his breathing and said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say, and because she had learned, in the past 3 months, saying nothing was sometimes the most precise and honest form of communication available. A package arrived in March. The postmark was Moncton, a return address. Inside the cardboard box, no letter, no note of any kind, just a battered canvas training guide and 3 small booklets on working dog psychology from the 70s, the spines cracked and their margins covered in handwriting so small and dense it would have taken hours to read in full. Tucked into the first booklet was a photograph, black and white, air, printed on the thick paper stock of another era. Younger Edmund Croft, or someone who could only be Edmund Croft, stood in a field somewhere, trees in the background, in a jacket with no identifying marks of any kind. Beside him, sitting at perfect attention at his left hip, was a German shepherd of the type Okafor, recognized as a direct ancestor of the line that had eventually produced Bravo. The man and the dog were not looking at the camera, they were looking at each other And in that shared gaze was something so complete and self-sufficient that the photograph felt like an intrusion, like a door opened onto a private room. On the inside back cover of the first booklet, in that same small, careful handwriting, 4 words had been written and then underlined once. The dog holds 2. Okafor set the photograph on her desk. She looked at it for a long time. Airy. Then she put on her jacket and went to start the morning session. And Bravo was already at the front of his run waiting. Fields. And the sun was coming through the spruce trees at a low angle, the way it does in March in Ontario. Pale and determined, and not quite warm yet, but getting there. Unlatched the gate, and he came out and sat at her left side with his shoulder against her leg. And she looked down at him, and he looked up at her. And neither of them needed anything explained.